Hi, boys and girls. It is time for Read Aloud again. We are reading The Parker Inheritance by Brian Johnson, and we are in chapter 6 right now. So Brandon and Candace have just decided to head on upstairs and check out the attic. So the attic is that area that's kind of used for storage sometimes in houses. So chapter 6. Candace poked her head into her mother's office to tell her what they were up to. Be careful up there, her mother said. Any trace of anger towards Candace from before had disappeared. This house has been boarded up for months. There's no telling what you could find. The entrance to the attic was in the garage. Candace was already sweating by the time she pulled down the ceiling door. Brandon flipped on the light and they headed up the rickety stairs. The wooden slats groaned beneath them. The attic was even hotter than the garage. There looked to be nothing but junk up there. Old Christmas decorations, a sewing machine, and spools of dated cloth. Yuck, Brandon said, wiping at his face. I just got some spider webs in my mouth. Laughing, Candace walked to the far corner of the room. Then she smiled. Over here, she said to Brandon. There, against the wall, was a box labeled, For Candace. She had slid the box top off by the time Brandon reached her. At first, all they found inside were textbooks, dictionaries, and old encyclopedias. Oh, that's not quite the new reading I was hoping for, Brandon said. They continued pulling book after book out of the box, but nothing seemed remotely interesting to Candace. Brandon had stopped to page through a book on Greek mythology. This isn't that bad, he said. Can I borrow it? Fine by me, Candace said as she removed the last textbook. And that's when she saw the puzzle book. Candace recognized it immediately. It was a thick paperback, full of logic games and brain teasers that she'd solved years ago. She brought the book to her nose. Maybe it was in her imagination, but she thought she smelled traces of lavender. She cracked the book open and an envelope slipped out and floated to the floor. She picked up the letter, thinking it was an old piece of mail that had been used as a bookmark long ago. She flipped it over looking for an address, and instead she found a small note. The note said, Find the path. Solve the puzzle. It was her grandmother's writing, swirling loops in dark blue ink. The words reminded Candace of what her grandmother used to say, just because you don't see the path doesn't mean it's not there. Candace wiped her hands. They were sweaty and shaking. The note felt like a message from beyond the grave. She stole a peek at Brandon. He was still looking at the mythology book. She quickly returned the letter to the puzzle book. We should head downstairs, she said. We're going to melt away if we stay up here much longer. He nodded. Sure thing. But what about these other books? Don't worry about them, she said, already standing. I'll come back later and box them up. He shrugged but followed her downstairs. Once they reached the living room, Brandon peeked out the window. Shoot, they're back. He smiled timidly at her. Do you mind if I hang out here for a few minutes? I promise I won't bother you. Sure, no problem, she said, walking toward the kitchen, the puzzle book still tight in her hands. I'll be back in a second. She sat down at the table and cracked open the book. Then she read the note on the envelope again. Yep, she was sure of it. It was her grandmother's writing. Since the envelope wasn't sealed, Candace decided there was no harm in seeing what was inside. It was only after she unfolded the sheet of paper that she hesitated. The letter was addressed to her grandmother. It almost seemed intrusive to read it. She almost returned it to the envelope. Almost. But she was a reader, she reminded herself, and readers read. And so Candace read the letter. This is what the letter said. August 10th, 2007. Dear Ms. Caldwell, I write to you on behalf of the Washington family. I'm sure you've never met them. How could you? The Allen boys ran them out of Lambert long before you arrived in the city. And when the Washingtons appealed for justice, the city officials denied them at every turn. Enoch, Leanne, and Saban Washington became the newest victims of the city's long-standing discrimination against black people. I love Saban, and that is why I spent 30 years destroying the Allens step by step. My first strike was physical, and then I wrecked them financially. I was the majority owner of the corporation that bought out Allen Textiles. I purchased Solar Industries simply so I could move their plant out of Lambert, ruining the Allens' land lease. My goal was to wreak havoc, not only on the Allens, but the entire city. It seemed fitting. But Saban Washington still cared for Lambert. She asked me to show compassion. Unlike her father, unlike me, she believed in the balance of justice and forgiveness, and even now, 7 years after her death, I cannot deny her. Thus, I have created an opportunity for Lambert to earn back everything I took from the city, a fortune totaling $40 million at my last reckoning. I've created a puzzle mystery that will take you deep into the city's past. The person who finds this inheritance will receive 1/10 of the money. The remainder will be allocated to the city. In return, the winner must share what he or she learns through the puzzle with the world. Here's your first clue. Number 1. Saban's father loved tennis, but he grew up idolizing a team in another sport. I wish you had a chance to meet Saban and her parents. Saban was amazing, but her mother was too. Leanne Washington's days as a volunteer at her church did more for Lambert's children than most people will ever know. Like her mother, Saban believed in giving people a second chance, or in my case, 3. She was truly greater than the sum of her parts. Beautiful, smart, educated, compassionate, she loved laughter and literature and math. And she was beauty personified in the tennis courts. Easily talented enough to thrive on the collegiate and national levels. But because she loved me more, she chose to give it all up. She was everything a poor, simple boy like me could hope for. She loved all. Black, white, rich, poor. She loved Lambert, despite what it did to her and her father. She loved me, even after I became a ghost of my former self. Here lies your challenge. Saban is the key, the one who will lead you to my fortune. She is the only reason you are getting this opportunity. Do not squander it. I have sent similar versions of this letter to the mayor, the school district superintendent, the chair of the school board, and the editor of the Lambert Trader. Your predecessors failed to protect the Washington family at great cost. This is your chance to make right what once went so utterly wrong. This is your chance to create a better world for your grandchild. But do not delay. These clues, like Saban, will not be of this world forever. Hoping to find another page, Candace looked in the envelope, but it was empty. That was all there was to the letter. Who had written it, and why had he left it unsigned? And what was it still doing in her grandmother's attic? Candace placed the letter on the table and then wiped her still clammy, sweaty hands on her jeans. She had never heard of Enoch or Leanne Washington. Nor had she heard of Saban, whose name she pronounced in her head as Siobhan. All she knew was that Enoch Washington and his family were black, and the Allens were rich and powerful and white. When she had told her friends she was moving to Lambert for the summer, a city in the deep South barely 1/5 the size of Atlanta, Dee Dee had genuinely worried that Candace and her mom would be attacked by men in white robes on horseback. Candace's father, who was supposed to be chauffeuring the girls to the mall and not listening to them, quickly jumped into the conversation, telling them that they didn't need to worry about the Ku Klux Klan, especially in a progressive city like Lambert. Candace didn't exactly believe her father, but she also didn't know enough about the city to disagree with him. Even if Lambert was progressive now, though, could her father still say the same about the city when the Washingtons lived there, whoever they were? She ran her thumb over her grandmother's handwritten words. Find the path. Solve the puzzle. What if her grandmother hadn't made a mistake? What if there was a treasure? What if her grandmother had put the letter there on purpose? For her. That is the end of chapter 7. Now, you actually have enough clues in the letter that I just read to solve the mystery. So that should give you something to think about. Also, something that came up in this chapter that we may want to be thinking about, because this book, if you look at the front cover, you can see how we're going to be looking at different time periods in Lambert's history. And so in this chapter, they mentioned something at the end, the Ku Klux Klan, which were a group of people who were very racist and who believed that people with different skin colors were not as good as people with white skin colors. So we're going to be seeing some themes in here that looks kind of strange to us today. But there is going to be things like discrimination where they're not treating people equally. And we can see from the clues in that letter that was a big part of what prompted this whole prize, this whole mystery, because somebody was trying to punish the people who made cruel decisions and discriminated against people. And now this mystery writer is trying to give them an opportunity to earn back what was taken away. So it is going to have some challenging themes in this book, but the mystery and the journey as we learn what happened in the town of Lambert is worth it. So, as I said, the clues are all there in the letter that we just read. So keep those in mind as we read ahead in future chapters.